The key turned in the lock with a weary, metallic sigh that perfectly captured my life. I stepped into the oppressive silence of my own home, the door clicking shut behind me like a seal on a tomb. The air was stale, smelling of expensive perfume and disregarded dreams. I dropped my worn laptop bag by the door, its weight a familiar anchor. No greeting, no sounds of dinner, just the low murmur of the television from the living room. I found her exactly where I knew she'd be, curled on the far end of the plush, gray sofa, the spectral glow of her phone screen illuminating my wife Cynthia's perfectly composed face. She was scrolling through a feed of luxury handbags, her brow furrowed in concentration. She didn't look up. She never did. A small, stubborn ember of hope, one I thought I'd smothered long ago, sparked weakly in my chest. I had news, good news. I'd been clutching it to myself all afternoon, a tiny shield. "Cynthia," I began, my voice softer than I intended, almost pleading. I cleared my throat. "Hey, I got some news today." A noncommittal hum. Her thumb continued its mindless scrolling. "It's a bonus," I pressed on, stepping further into the room. "From the Henderson Project, it's not huge, but it's something. A few $100. I was thinking, maybe we could use it for that weekend getaway we always talked about. Up to the mountains, just a couple of days away from all this." I gestured vaguely at the room, at our life that felt more like a waiting room. Finally, her scrolling stopped. She slowly, deliberately, lowered her phone into her lap and turned her head to look at me. Her eyes, a cool, piercing blue, traveled from my scuffed shoes up my wrinkled office pants to my face. There was no warmth, only a slow, simmering assessment that made me feel like a specimen. A smirk, thin and cruel, twisted her perfectly painted lips. "A few $100, she repeated, her voice dripping with venomous sweetness. "You think a few $100 makes you a provider?" She let out a short, derisive laugh that felt like a physical slap. "Mark, that might cover the tips for a decent weekend. You think you can buy a getaway with that? You think you've earned a prize for just doing the bare minimum?" Heat rushed to my cheeks. The hopeful ember was snuffed out, leaving only cold ash. I just thought. "You thought wrong," she cut me off, her voice hardening. She picked her phone back up, a clear dismissal. "A man like you doesn't deserve nice things, Mark. You should be happy I'm even still here." The words hung in the air, final and absolute. They didn't just dismiss my idea, they dismissed me. My efforts, my presence, my existence. I stood there, rooted to the spot, watching her return to her digital world of luxury, a world where I was an unwelcome intruder. In that moment, something inside me, something that had been bending for years, finally and irreparably snapped. The silence of the master bedroom was a physical weight. Beside me, Cynthia slept the untroubled sleep of the self-righteous. The clock glowed a relentless red, 2:17 a.m. Sleep was a distant country. "A man like you doesn't deserve nice things." The sentence played on a loop, each repetition etching it deeper into my soul. I stared at the ceiling, the faint patterns morphing into a tapestry of my failures. I saw the eager, ambitious man I'd been 7 years ago, full of ideas and a burning desire to build something. I'd met Cynthia, a whirlwind of beauty and sharp wit, and I'd felt like the luckiest man alive. I'd mistaken her intensity for passion, her strong opinions for a shared vision. But slowly, the landscape had shifted. My dream of starting my own consultancy was a foolish risk. My preference for a quiet night was antisocial. The car I loved was an embarrassment. Every hobby, every friend, every aspiration was systematically dismantled until all that was left was this shell of a man who went to a job he hated to fund a life that brought him no joy. I thought of the flowers I'd brought her for no reason, met with a question about why I didn't get the more expensive bouquet. I remembered the anniversary dinner where she'd complained about the wine all night. I saw the stacks of designer shoeboxes in her closet, each one a monument to my inadequacy, purchased with the money I earned but she controlled. A hot tear of pure shame escaped my eye. I wasn't crying for her, I was crying for the person I had allowed myself to become. A doormat, A wallet with legs, a ghost. But tonight was different. The pain was a sharp, clarifying agony. It wasn't just about this one comment, it was about every single one that had come before it. The ember of hope was gone, but in its place, something new was kindling in the dark, a cold, focused rage. It wasn't the kind that made you shout. It was the kind that made you plan. It promised with silent, terrifying certainty that things were going to change. The alarm blared at 6:30 a.m. Normally, I'd fumble to silence it, my body heavy with dread. But this morning, my hand moved with a purpose that surprised me. I switched it off and lay still, listening. Cynthia was already in the shower. The familiar script was about to begin. I took a deep breath, the cold resolve from the night now a solid core within me. This was day one. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. The rich, aromatic scent filled the room, a small pleasure I usually couldn't enjoy under her scrutiny. Today, I savored it. Cynthia emerged, wrapped in her plush robe, her face a mask of mild discontent. She picked up her mug and took a sip. Her nose wrinkled. "It's a bit bitter today, don't you think?" she said, not looking at me. "You need to be more careful with the measurements." The old me would have apologized. The old me would have promised to do better. The old me was gone. I simply looked at her, my expression neutral. "I'll note that," I said, my voice even. My response was so out of character that it finally pulled her attention from her screen. She glanced at me, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. I met her gaze for a second, then turned away. "Have a good day," I said, and walked out. I drove to the office, but the city looked different, charged with potential. During my lunch break, I didn't go to the cafeteria. I walked to a bank branch I never used. The inside was cool and quiet. I sat down with a bank officer. "I'd like to open a new savings account." "Joint or individual?" she asked. "Individual," I said, the word feeling like a declaration of independence. I filled out the forms, my hand steady. I took out my wallet and retrieved the crisp $100 bills from my bonus. I slid them across the counter. "This will be my initial deposit." I walked out, the temporary debit card feeling like the heaviest, most powerful thing I'd ever owned. It wasn't the money. It was the meaning. It was a seed. And I was going to water it with every ounce of my sweat, until it grew into a tree, so large its shadow would eclipse the miserable little world I was leaving behind. The new routine became my armor. By day, I was the same quiet Mark at the office, but my inner life was a whirlwind of secret calculation. I tracked my hidden finances. I researched real estate. The grueling weekend work with my friend Leo was my boot camp, my body aching but my spirit feeling stronger with every assessed property. I came home one Friday, exhausted but exhilarated. The project was expanding. I was fantasizing about a hot shower and a long night of planning when I walked in and found Cynthia waiting for me, a tight, expectant smile on her face. "Mark, good you're home," she said, a false warmth in her tone. "I have some wonderful news." I remained standing, my bag still on my shoulder. "Oh." "Yes, Cassandra is coming to visit next week. She'll be staying for a full week. Her sister. Her visits were an exercise in endurance." "Okay," I said cautiously. "I'll try to be free for dinner one night." Cynthia's smile widened. "Well, that's the thing. The guest room is such a mess with your things, and you know how Cassandra values her comfort. So it would be best if you slept in there while she uses our room. It's only for a week." The request, delivered as a decree, hung in the air. She was evicting me from my own bedroom, for her sister's comfort. It was a power play, a reminder that my comfort was disposable. The old me would have sighed and retreated. The new me just looked at her. I saw the triumphant glint in her eyes. I simply gave a slow, single nod. "Whatever you think is best," I said, my voice flat. That night I lay in the narrow, uncomfortable guest bed. I could hear their voices from down the hall. Cynthia and Cassandra were talking, their laughter bubbling through the walls. I strained my ears, and a snippet of conversation, crystal clear, pierced the silence. It was Cassandra's voice, still sticking it out with him. And Cynthia's reply, laced with a contemptuous laugh that felt like a shard of glass in my heart. I know. He's so pathetic. Just a placeholder. I'm just waiting for the right time to upgrade. Placeholder. The word echoed in the dark. It was the final, definitive label for my existence. There was no love, no respect. I was just furniture, something to be used until a better model came along. Any lingering doubt evaporated. The plan was no longer about building a new life. It was about surviving this one, and survival meant war. The guest room became my war room. Lying there in the dark after hearing I was a placeholder, I didn't feel pain anymore. A profound calm settled over me. The enemy was identified. Now I just had to be smarter and more patient. The next morning, I told Cynthia I had errands to run. I met Leo at a foreclosed property on the rough side of town. The house was a dilapidated bungalow, but to me, it was a cathedral of opportunity. Leo clapped me on the shoulder. "You ready for this? It's not pretty." "I've seen worse," I said, and I meant it. For the next 4 hours, we combed through the property. Leo taught me what to look for: structural cracks, water damage, outdated wiring. With my analytical mind, I took to it naturally. I took notes, sketched diagrams, comped property values. During a break, Leo looked at me. "You okay, man? You seem different, harder." I stared at the broken house. "I'm getting there," I said quietly. "I just had a long overdue wake-up call. I gestured at my notepad, "this is keeping me sane." Leo nodded. "Well, the work is there. I've got 3 more properties next weekend. Cash. I'll be here." I worked until my muscles ached and my clothes were stained. When Leo handed me a thick envelope of cash, the weight of it in my hand was more satisfying than any paycheck. This was mine, earned by my own grit, untouched by Cynthia's judgment. I drove home exhausted. I walked in, covered in dirt, to find Cynthia and Cassandra sipping wine at the kitchen island. They both looked up, their noses wrinkling. "My God, Mark, what have you been doing? You smell like a construction site," Cynthia said. Cassandra gave a condescending smile. "Did you finally decide to do some manual labor, Mark? How rustic." I looked from one sister to the other. I didn't apologize, I didn't explain. "Something like that," I said, my voice low and steady. I walked past them down the hall, leaving a trail of dirt on the pristine floor. It was a small, silent rebellion, but it felt like a victory. For the first time, their words felt small and insignificant. I was building a fortress, and their noise couldn't penetrate the walls I was erecting, brick by secret brick. The rustic comment solidified it. To Cynthia, my value was purely transactional, and my current transaction was insufficient. I needed to understand the full scope of the financial prison I was funding. That Sunday, while they were out at brunch, I logged into our joint bank account. I had avoided it for years, a willful blindness to avoid conflict. Now I forced myself to look. The numbers told a story of quiet exploitation. My salary was deposited on the first of every month, and like clockwork, it was systematically disemboweled. I scrolled back, my stomach tightening. Transfers to Cynthia's personal account, labeled shopping, charges from high-end boutiques, hundreds at spas and salons, lavish dinners, a personal wellness coach that cost more than my car payment. And the subtle digs. A $15 charge from a coffee shop near my office on a day I'd taken a bag lunch, while her lunch with a friend was $120. She was living a life of luxury, funded by my labor, while mocking me for my lack of ambition. I opened my private laptop and began documenting everything. I wasn't just looking for ammunition. I was conducting a forensic audit of my own misery. I created categories: unnecessary apparel, luxury services, dining excess. The totals for the past year made me recoil. It was enough for a down payment on a rental property. It was enough to have funded my own consultancy years ago. I thought of her complaints about my cheap car, a reliable sedan that was fully paid off. Her scoffing at my suggestion we invest. All the while, she was burning our future on handbags and facials. A strange clarity descended. This wasn't just a bad marriage, it was a parasitic one. She was the parasite and I was the host, being slowly drained. The love had died years ago, but this was an active, ongoing extraction. I closed the laptop. The joint account was a crime scene and I had the evidence. The feeling of victimhood was replaced by a strategic coldness. I wasn't just saving money, I was repatriating assets. I was funding my escape. The prison walls were still there, but I was now meticulously digging the tunnel. 3 months. That's how long I lived the double life. By day, the obedient office drone. By night and weekend, the property assessor, the strategist, the ghost in my own home. The physical toll was immense. There were nights in the guest room where I'd fall onto the bed, every muscle screaming, and be asleep in seconds. But I'd wake up feeling cleaner than I had in years, the grime on my skin a badge of honor, not a mark of shame. The secret bank account was my sanctuary. Every cash deposit from Leo, every skipped lunch where I put the $10 into my account instead, every time I resisted buying a coffee and transferred the $5, it all added up. It was a game, a thrilling, high-stakes game where the prize was my own soul. And then, one Tuesday evening, sitting in my car outside a convenience store after another late work meeting, I opened the banking app on my phone. I just deposited another weekend's earnings. I typed in my password, my heart doing its usual nervous flutter. The balance loaded. 10,317.48. I stared at the number, I blinked. I closed the app and reopened it. The number was still there, $10,317.48. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. It was money Cynthia didn't know about, couldn't touch, couldn't spend on another pair of shoes she didn't need. It was money that represented hundreds of hours of my life, bought back from the brink. A sound escaped my lips, a choked half-laugh, half-sob. I leaned my head back against the headrest, a slow, genuine smile spreading across my face for the first time in what felt like a decade. This was more than money. This was proof. Proof that I could do it. Proof that I wasn't the pathetic, worthless man she said I was. This was a down payment on my freedom. I didn't buy anything to celebrate. The number itself was the celebration. I drove home, and when Cynthia made a snide remark about me being late, I just smiled and said, "Traffic was terrible." I didn't care. I had 10,000 reasons not to care. The seed had sprouted. It was now a sapling, and it was hungry for the sun. The physical labor with Leo was brutal. I was using muscles I forgot I had, hauling myself through crawl spaces, climbing onto shaky roofs. My body was protesting loudly. I was constantly sore, my hands were developing calluses, and I had a permanent layer of dust in my pores. It was Leo who pointed it out. "You're getting skinny, man. You need to eat. And you need to get some strength or you're gonna throw your back out on one of these jobs." He was right. The exhaustion was becoming a liability. So, with a fraction of my secret hoard, I joined the cheapest, no-frills gym I could find. It was a dungeon of iron and sweat, populated by serious-looking men and women who weren't there to be seen, but to work. The first day was pure agony. I could barely bench the bar. My legs shook after a few squats. I felt weak, exposed, but I remembered Cynthia's laugh. I remembered the word placeholder. And I channeled all of that, the shame, the anger, the cold resolve into the iron. Every rep was a fuck you. Every drop of sweat was purging her poison from my system. It became my new therapy. While Cynthia was at her spa getting pampered, I was in the gym, dismantling the soft, compliant man she had created and forging a new one in fire and repetition. After 2 months, the changes were visible. The softness around my middle tightened and vanished. My shoulders broadened. My posture changed. I walked taller, my chest naturally a little more out, my gaze a little more direct. I bought new clothes from a thrift store. Simple, well-fitting t-shirts and jeans that actually complemented my new frame. It was another small act of rebellion, another reclamation. Cynthia noticed, of course. She noticed in the way a property owner notices a crack in the foundation. It was a subtle shift, not an improvement. We were passing in the hallway when she stopped, her eyes narrowing as she looked me up and down. "You've lost weight," she stated, her tone accusatory. "You're not getting sick, are you? Or are you trying to impress someone at the office?" The implication was clear and laced with her signature jealousy and suspicion. I just looked at her, meeting her gaze squarely. "Just trying to be healthier," I said, my voice calm. I didn't smile. I didn't justify. I just held her stare until she was the one who looked away, a faint frown on her face as she continued down the hall. She couldn't articulate it, but she could feel it. The ground was shifting beneath her feet. The placeholder was developing a spine. The grind was relentless, but it was building momentum. I was no longer just Leo's grunt worker. I was his analyst. I started compiling detailed reports for him, not just notes. I used my office skills to create spreadsheets that projected repair costs, estimated after-repair value, and potential profit margins. I taught myself basic architectural software to sketch out minor renovation ideas. Leo was impressed. "Damn, Mark, this is next level. You're wasting your time at that soul-crushing job of yours." "I'm working on it," I'd tell him, a plan slowly crystallizing in my mind. One Friday, after we'd finished a particularly complex assessment on a small apartment building, Leo didn't just hand me the cash. He handed me a business card. "Friend of mine," he said. "Developer. Name's Ben Carter. He's looking at a big portfolio of properties and needs someone sharp to run the numbers. I showed him one of your reports. He wants to meet you." My heart leaped into my throat. This was it, a real chance. "Leo, I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Meeting's Monday at 10 a.m. at his office downtown. Don't wear your work clothes," he grinned. "And don't tell the ball and chain." Monday felt like the most important day of my life. I called in sick to my real job, a thrill of rebellion coursing through me. I put on the best suit I owned. One Cynthia had picked out, of course, but it fit my new frame better than it ever had. I walked into Ben Carter's sleek, high-rise office feeling a nervous energy, but also a confidence I hadn't felt in a professional setting for years. Ben was a sharp, no-nonsense man in his 50s. He didn't waste time. "Leo speaks highly of you. Your report was thorough. I have 12 properties. I need a full assessment and viability analysis for each. What would you charge?" I'd done the math. I'd lain awake the past 2 nights running the numbers. I named a figure that was a quarter of what a big firm would charge, but it was still a number that made my head spin. It was more than my annual salary. Ben didn't even blink. He slid a contract across the polished mahogany desk. "I need it in 6 weeks. Can you do it?" I looked at the contract. I looked at my name typed on the line for the service provider. This was real. This was mine. "I can," I said, my voice firm. I signed the document. As I walked out of that office, the signed contract in my briefcase, I felt like I was floating. This was more than a contract. It was a verdict. It was the world confirming that I wasn't worthless, that I had value. I had just been looking for it in the wrong place, in the eyes of a woman who was determined never to see it. The secret of the contract was a live wire humming inside me. I had to work from home sometimes to access files, telling Cynthia I was telecommuting due to a sensitive project. The lie came easily now, protected by the greater truth of my mission. One evening, I was in the guest room, now my de facto office, surrounded by floor plans and spreadsheets. I'd taken off my suit jacket and hung it on the back of the door. I must have been distracted because I didn't hear her come in. "What's this?" Her voice was like a whip crack. I spun around. Cynthia was standing in the doorway, holding the jacket. She was pinching the fabric of the inner lapel between her thumb and forefinger, a look of pure suspicion on her face. Between her fingers was a small, paper receipt. The receipt from a high-end coffee shop near Ben Carter's office from that morning. My blood ran cold. I'd forgotten to empty the pockets. Her eyes scanned the receipt, then lifted to mine, blazing with cold fire. "What were you doing on the financial district side of town this morning, Mark? And since when do you buy a $7 latte?" Her voice was dangerously quiet. The old me would have stammered, would have fabricated a weak lie. But the man with the $10,000 bank account and the life-changing contract in his briefcase just looked at her. "I had a meeting," I said, my voice calm. "A meeting," she repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "With who, to do what, and with whose money?" She took a step forward, waving the receipt like a tiny, damning flag. "Is this what you've been doing, sneaking around, wasting our money on overpriced coffee while you, what, play businessman?" She was unraveling, and it was terrifying and exhilarating to watch. The control was slipping, and she could feel it. "It's not your money, Cynthia," I said, the words hanging in the air between us. She froze, her eyes widening in shock. I had never, ever said anything like that to her. "What did you just say to me?" "I said it's not your money." I stood up, feeling a foot taller. "That $7 latte came from my account, the one I fund with the work I do." Her face contorted with rage. "Your account, your account. We have a joint account. Every dollar you make is mine, ours." She was shrieking now, the carefully constructed mask of composure shattered. I didn't raise my voice. I remained eerily calm. "Is that so?" I asked. "Then tell me, Cynthia, how much did you spend on those 3 new handbags last month? The ones from the boutique on Elm Street. Was it $1,200, or was it closer to 15? The color drained from her face. The fight went out of her for a second, replaced by sheer, stunned confusion. How could I possibly know that? "It seems we have different definitions of waste," I said, echoing the words I'd practiced in my head 100 times. I walked past her, out of the room, leaving her standing there, clutching the tiny receipt, the foundations of her world cracking apart beneath her perfectly manicured feet.